Build to Rent Network, where we help our investors identify, manage, and purchase their next real estate investment. Today's guest is Todd Anderson. Todd, you are a new district manager here at Build to Rent. How's been your experience so far?
It's been great. I love moving to Florida. Just moved to Florida recently, and I'm having a great time down here.
Yeah, one of the things that we're most excited about is just your breadth of experience from what you've done before. You've managed a large number of property management properties in the past. Todd, can you educate our audience about what you've done in the past?
So I started my real estate investing journey in 1995, where I bought a single family house and put about 3 months of work into that house to make it usable. And the plan was immediately to sell that house, but we had so many people that walked down the sidewalk while I was working on that house that asked me if I was going to rent it, that I decided to try renting it. It worked out very well. The next year I bought a duplex. The year after that I bought a triplex and just started growing from there. I got to the point personally where I had 90 units in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area that I managed myself. Um, and At that point, we started looking at bigger options. And actually, in 2004, we decided to move some investments down to the state of Florida, where I bought two bigger complexes, a 50 unit and a 224 unit. And at that point, we had to look into other people managing our properties. We just had too many to take care of ourselves. And we were out of state, which I would never recommend anybody managing their own property from a different state. So at that point, we started managing for other people.
Thank you for sharing that to me. So walk me through kind of when a lot of investors get started, they look at doing the same things that you did, where you identify a property that has room for forced appreciation, and you do all this hard work that caused a lot of brain damage, but ultimately you sell it and you get a big paycheck at the end of it. That's at least the goal. In your case, you decided to hold on to it and rent it out. When did you know that that was the better strategy for you to keep doing moving forward?
Well, on the first house, that's an interesting question. On the first house that we took care of, I bought it for $16,000 on a credit card because I didn't have any money at the time. I put another $30,000 into that renovation, and I could have sold that and paid that off. Instead, I rented it, and in 2 years, I had that entirely paid off. So I had no mortgage on the house. I owned the property for another 2 years after that, where I was just cash flowing. And then I did decide that to sell that property 6 years down the road to the tenants that were in it, and made about 150% over my initial total investment.
Right. And I think it's pretty clear that when you go the flipping route, you can't do flipping passive, right?
No.
Flipping is always an active full-time job, and it can often feel like a job where, when you're renting the property out, there's always moments where it's going to be a little bit more active than other times. But most of the time, if it's done correctly, it should feel like a passive investment.
That's exactly right. Once we got the tenants in there, good tenants in there, and paying us monthly rent, they were happy with the property. It was well taken care of, because we put so much work into it when we got it ready. That it was well taken care of. It was pretty hands off for 4 to 5 years.
Now, you had mentioned that you went into the property management business. Was that your initial intention was to become a property manager, or was it more managing your own properties forced you to manage other people's properties?
So I did not actively go into anything being a property man. To to be a property manager. I wanted to be a real estate investor, and we were quite successful at that. I was kind of forced into the property management business because of the crash in 2008. Um, in 2008, things tightened up, and we went from in some bigger properties from having a 6 month waiting list to being 60% vacant in less than 4 months. And so some things had to change. And as we move forward, um, the decision was made that we would because we were tightening the belt, do another investment and start managing for other people.
Got it. So it was a skill set you've already carved out for your own benefit that you saw there was enough market value to do for other people.
That's exactly right. And in the market of the 2008 through 2012, we found that a lot of our connections and past clients had properties that they could not sell. So we saw a hole in the market that other people, they were moving out of state for jobs in an economy that wasn't so good, and they knew they couldn't manage them themselves. So in Minnesota, we started a property management company. Over the next 15 years, we grew that company to just under 500 single family homes and another 300 association doors.
Yeah, and there are a lot of when people think about a property management company, they think of you're taking on all the headaches that other people don't want to take on. Oftentimes, you're also the parting my strong language, but you're the doormat for the investor, where sometimes you're the only person they can yell at. Um, would you recommend someone start their own property management company? And if so, how do they build it in a way that they're not kind of being beat up every single day?
That is the hard part about the property management business. There is never a phone call with good news. Nobody ever calls you to tell you you're doing a good job. It's always, I have this problem, I have that problem. There's always a problem to solve. So it is a very tough business, and the only way you can actually be very good at the business is to have very good processes set up so that every time something happens, you've already got a roadmap of how to solve that problem. You've already got a process in place that you know how to go to the next step. And that takes a lot of
Yeah,
time.
I would have to agree. Over the years, I've worked with a lot of different property management companies, and the biggest challenge is always communication. Either not knowing about a problem, right away, or sometimes not having a solution already in place. So, I find that the property management companies that work best are the ones that will tell you the problem and the solution at that same phone call, right? That same conversation, and they'll let you know right away. Because, an investor is not looking to use a property management company just so that when they get a phone call, they just relay the information to you. That's not a benefit to an investor. Now, if you say, hey, the fridge is messed up, we've already contacted someone, they can replace that part for $200. Do you want us to just take care of it? That's now like great. You presented me the bad news, but I don't have to go solve this. You've already told me the answer, and chances are I'm just going to say yes. I'm going to go with your expertise on it because I'm not the expert. A bad one would simply present the problem and then leave the decision open ended. That's never good.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's why I talk about processes. There has to be a process in place. And to your point about a refrigerator, there's two different options you can go with, and we would research that and do the look at the two different options. Either you can put a $200 part in to replace the one, or we can get you a new fridge for $600. That's brand new.
Right. And so obviously, real estate investment is often sold as being a passive investment, which it can be for a stretch of time, but always at some point, some decisions are going to have to be made. And so I find that having a great relationship with your property management company goes a long way. So, the property manager is often tackling a lot of issues. And I think that, as an investor, it's also great to be someone that they're happy to, like, a thank you goes a long way. Showing appreciation goes a long way. And being someone that's easy to work with also goes a long way. So there's no, and to be honest, like most property management companies, they have to have a lot of doors to make profitability. So no property manager, you can't expect them to have 100% of their attention on an issue at a particular time. But you have to know in which they best communicate and work with them on the issues. When you were a property manager, what were the ways in which you've appreciated working with your investors?
Absolutely. You're right about everything you said. It is definitely a volume business. Nobody can make it on 10 different properties. You have to have a large volume. So you are trying to solve a lot of problems at one time. And certainly I liked working with the more professional um, owners better, the ones that treated their investment like a business, not treated their investment like a single family house, like their house. And it took the emotion out of it. Things break in a house. It will happen. You will have costs. You have to deal with that cost and move on and treat your investment like the business that it is. And those were the ones that I always enjoyed working with, because when a problem presents itself, we've got two or three different solutions. Let's work through those solutions, solve the problem, and move forward.
Yeah. Now, with your property management company, you have a very happy ending, right? Not only are you no longer in property management, but you also were able to exit, for assumably a large amount of money. So that's a double victory. And then you made the conscious decision to not go back into property management. What are some of the things you're looking forward to doing outside of property management?
I love working with investors. I love the investment process. I like finding the property. I like running the numbers on the property, making sure that it's a profitable property, and then moving forward with it. I don't like the day-to-day management, but I love the thrill of working with and on investments.
Yeah.
So
And so
I'm
you're
very
you're
much
leaving.
looking forward to that.
Yeah, so you're leaving a state that most real estate investors wouldn't invest in unless they've already lived there and there are some proximity close to them, and you're moving to a state like Florida that a lot of international even multi-state investors are putting investors in. A lot of people are relocating in since deciding to make the move yourself. What have been some of the key differences you've seen between Minnesota and Florida?
Yeah, absolutely. I would not have had any investments in Minnesota had I not lived there. It was just absolutely a proximity to the investment, and I was doing the management myself. I could see and touch the properties. Um, I didn't have a connection with a very good property manager in a different state, so I didn't feel comfortable in moving there. There is some monumental differences between uh, some of the states in the country and, well, landlord friendly states and tenant friendly states. If we go into that, there's 8 states in the country. The first step of that, there's 8 states in the country that have rent controls. And Minnesota happens to be one of those states where in the individual municipalities, will dictate how much you can raise your rent per year. Unfortunately, they don't dictate how much insurance or property taxes go up, but they do dictate how much your rent can go up. And in a state like Florida, they have nothing like that. Um, to bring that a little bit further, they also, most of the same 8 states that have rent controls have controls on security deposits. They dictate the exact amount that you can charge for a security deposit. Florida, being a more landlord friendly state, does not have any controls on security deposits. So just on the first look level, it's a major difference in a business getting to a landlord friendly state.
Yeah, and just to sit on the rent control part, a lot of times investors get seen as a greedy bunch, or for some reason, once you say you're an investor, they tie you into being a BlackRock, as if we're a huge heartless conglomerate. And instead of a lot of investors are trying to find ways to supplement their own income. You and I both have a great deal of real estate properties, but we're still working every single day, and we like having diverse sources of income and the wealth creation. A lot of what we're looking to do is also pass on a legacy to our families, to not have to grind as hard, and just to build wealth, same as any other, retirement account that you would. Except we're actually solving a problem that's very important. We're actually, creating inventory, creating housing for people. And, you don't do well in real estate unless you have a great product and you're able to keep your tenants happy. So, with that in mind, when you make it harder for investors to provide housing for different markets, you're going to see the quality of housing in that market deteriorate over time, because there's no incentive to improve that property or the surrounding area. You're going to see less supply of housing being brought in. And the best way to reduce rents is to bring in more supply. So once there's a supply constraint, now you're either going to have a quality deficiency, or you're going to have just more demand than is necessary for that market. So, in the areas that we've seen these kind of plans get placed, what you find is the quality of life goes down. And the only way that new buildings get built is if there's a roundabout way of getting money from the city or local government there. And not, that's actually directly feeding those black rocks and larger. And you're actually cutting the people that are just trying to get ahead in life. You're cutting them out and not giving them any room to play. So for me, it's actually very contradictory. To in one hand have rent control, but then only make money through housing in those markets. So I think it backfires more times than not. And there are smarter ways to do it. I think, for example, providing subsidies to low income housing makes sense, right? If you say, hey, we're going to increase, the amount you can afford by $500 a month, that's a very market friendly way of addressing some of the affordability issues. But rent control is just does not work, and it ends up meaning that more capital goes to other areas, and there's less investment in your region.
Yeah, absolutely. And Minnesota hasn't seen that yet. They've had rent control in for, I think it's 6 years. But if you look at places that have had it for a long time, like New Jersey or New York, you can clearly see that the rent control buildings do not get taken care of. They're there's just no way to keep and no incentive for owners, especially of bigger properties, to take care of the properties or improve the properties if they can't improve the rent. And Minnesota hasn't seen that yet, but that's coming right down the road. It's the constant rule of unintended consequences. Um, it sounds like a good idea on the face, but the reality of the law is you're forcing people to do things that they wouldn't normally do.
Right. Another major factor when it comes to determining a landlord-friendly state is property taxes. And property taxes is something that has a direct impact on an investor's bottom line. Uh, so when you look at property taxes in the country as a whole, what are some of the things that you look for?
Absolutely, that's certainly one of the three things that define a landlord-friendly state versus a tenant-friendly state. Property taxes are a huge part. They're a necessary evil in real estate, and certainly looking towards states that have uh, a better tax structure is something that well, that's the reason I'm in Florida, because the tax structure in Minnesota is one of the highest tax structures in the country. It's bordering right along with New York and California, and getting in a more tax friendly state and getting your investments in more of a tax friendly state does nothing but improve the bottom line.
Yeah, usually when I speak to investors, they look for a couple of different common threads. One, they like to see population growth go up. Obviously, population growth is going to be, it's going to have great tailwinds, but from price appreciation, from rental demands, from future employers. Population growth is absolutely very important. The other part is just the affordability of the property itself, having cheap land. And you want to have nice, stable rents. Another huge perk is when you have no income tax. It's a big perk. And there are a couple of states that stand out. A lot of them within the Sun Belt. The two primary ones are Texas and Florida. And one of the biggest difference between Texas and Florida is property taxes. And so Florida gets most of its state revenue because both are no income state tax. They only pay federal taxes. So both need to get another way to get their revenue. So Florida is slightly above average on the sales tax, but they're actually well below average on the property tax. So Texas gets the majority of their state revenue through property taxes. So on average, Florida is going to be at a 0.9 property taxes. Texas is at a 1.9, a full percentage point above Florida. And when you think about, how that impacts your cash flow, well, having a higher sales tax has no impact. It'll impact some tourism, right? They'll get the dollars that way, but it's not going to impact your bottom line versus paying 1.9% in property tax in Texas. That's going to be a direct impact. So if all things being equal, rents and purchase price being equal, Florida, you're going to save a lot of money on property tax.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And that's even more of a distinction as you get the northern areas where you have both state income tax and property tax.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you think about the tailwinds of a place. How does a place like Connecticut attract young families? How? Like where does this future population growth come from? And so, as a country as a whole, we're kind of flatlined population wise. There's no, we have the baby boomers, we have the millennials, and there's really no other big generation coming after that. So we're looking at in-state migration, right? I mean, within the country. And again, if you're at an area where your population is aging and there's no future generation coming, you got to anticipate that it's going to be hard to force appreciation. It's going to be hard to increase your rent while your expenses are going to keep going up. So you're going to get squeezed from multiple angles. So the savior oftentimes is population for sure. There is also a big distinction when it comes to being able to evict the tenants. And, it's in Florida, it's more or less of a even exchange. Like you can stay here, but you have to pay. In other states where there's more tenant rights, you can often get caught in litigation for quite some time. Can you walk us through the process of kind of your experience with not being able to get tenants out as effectively as possible?
Yeah, that's definitely the third prong of the distinctions between tenant versus landlord friendly states is the eviction laws, um, and and there's a huge distinction between the tenant friendly states and the landlord friendly states on this. The tenant friendly states, some of them like Massachusetts, they have a 60-day notice period. So once the tenant becomes delinquent on rent, you have to give that tenant 60-day notice before you can even file an eviction. They also have a stay that most of the tenants know about, and they can file a stay in the court depending on the tenancy that they have, that can be anywhere from 6 months to 12 months before that eviction can be heard. Other states have anywhere from 15 to 45-day notice periods. Minnesota is a 30-day, or I'm sorry, is an 18-day notice period. So once you decide that that tenant's delinquent, you have that long before you can file in court. And that's the process kind of in every state to get a tenant out. Once you do get to court, court takes about what it takes throughout the country. It's about a week to 2 weeks to get through court once you get there. The big distinction is what happens before that and what happens after that. In Florida, there's a 3-day notice period. So once you have decided that that tenant's delinquent, you have to give them a 3-day notice period. 3 days after that, after the delinquency is calculated, you can file the eviction. As I said, the other part that is a distinction around the country is what happens after the court is done. Once you get what's called a writ of recovery from the property, then you have to move that tenant out. That can, in Minnesota, that can take up to 3 months to get the sheriff out, get the tenant out, and get the tenant's belongings out. Typically in Florida, that's under a week. Once the sheriff comes out to move the tenant out, you can immediately move the personal property out to the curb, leave it there, and you get your property back. You can start making money again. That's the biggest distinction. And that's one of the strongest prongs to make a landlord friendly state like Florida a good state to invest in.
Yeah, and I think both of us have gone through hardship in our lives. We've had ups and our downs, and so when we talk about landlord versus tenant friendly state, I don't want to make it seem as if there's like a rivalry or there's a competitive state of mind, but I think it's when you sign up to an agreement, how do we adhere to it? And so what happens is that if you are in a situation or in a state where one party can continuously break their agreement, you end up getting professionals that break agreements. So there's a lot of stories of what they call them professional tenants, where they will stay at a short-term rental and they just won't leave. And then they'll forge documents. They'll create narratives that they've been living there forever, that they have some sort of hardship, and that they can't be evicted. And these are people that are realizing that you're in a very lenient judicial state, and they're looking to exploit that. And so I think that it's when we say landlord friendly, we're saying that, hey, are we going to live up to this agreement, or are we going to honor this? Are we going to make sure to make this as judicial as possible? And when you're not in a landlord friendly state, you're basically saying that we're going to adhere to the party that's looking to rig the system, that's looking to take advantage of the situation, and that's not fair to either party at all. So when we look at where we are in this time of the year, wrapping up 2023, that there are a number of narratives of concern, and there's always a number of concerns that are happening in the marketplace, and some of them are justified, some of them are a lot of noise. But as a real estate investor, what advice would you give somebody looking to navigate the current challenges of the day?
That's a very interesting question. We're talking a lot about interest rates. We're talking a lot about availability of houses. I've been thinking about this a lot and looking into what some of the other experts are saying, and a lot of people are talking about maybe waiting and sitting on the sidelines for right now because interest rates will come back down. That may happen. Interest rates may come back down, but with where we are in the market and where we are in the inventory and what we have, if interest rates come down, I believe that prices are just going to go up because we don't have the inventory that's sitting around waiting to be bought up. So once the interest rates come down, the sellers and the builders are going to see that things are more affordable now, and the prices are going to go back up. So because of that, I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit in waiting if it's in your business plan to get into investment real estate. There's no huge incentive to wait because it's only going to get more expensive. There's a long time adage in real estate that you marry the property and you date the interest rate. If you buy now at the interest rates that are now and rates do improve, you've locked in the price. You can always refinance and get a lower rate. That's where I see the market right now.
Yeah, when I work with a lot of investors, we're often a lot of what we do when we work with investors is, I try not to predict what the future is. I try to always listen to someone's concern, and we try to identify a strategy to go around that concern. So again, this is already the first step is always to understand the full benefits of real estate. Like I'll have someone say, "Oh, that cash on cash is 9%. I can get a CD for 6 with less risk," right? And that sounds like a cute narrative, but you're not able to sell that CD for a higher value later on, right? So already, we're not getting the same returns. There are no tax benefits to having a CD or a 10-year treasury or anything. There's no tax unless you actually lose money, which that's not a good strategy. So also, you're paying 100% of your money into buying that CD or 10-year treasury. So there's no leverage involved. So you're paying 100% out versus real estate investment. You're only putting in 25%. Additionally, you might get a higher rate of return on that CD or treasury bill now, but chances are that that's not going to be around for much longer versus a property that gives you 9% cash on cash now is actually going to continue to overperform as time goes on. So as you keep adding years to that, your expenses are going to be fixed. They mostly stay the same versus your rental income keeps going up over time. So once we've established the benefits of real estate versus other places to put your money, then it's given your concerns, where do we best buy properties that takes advantage of what your concerns are? And what I mean by that is that if you are concerned that we're going to enter a recession, which again, my job is not to tell someone that we're not going to hit a recession, but if that's your concern, and the same number of people are going to exist, they're not going to evaporate. The same number of houses need to be created. We got to look at what market is going to have the greatest demand if there is a recession. And it's going to be more affordable. So we're going to move away from the higher end homes. We're going to go more to where the market rents are. So this is going to be areas where the rents are a little bit cheaper. And, the price point's going to be a little bit cheaper. And so in a recession, everybody who currently has an A-class property is going to go down a notch. They're going to be willing to go to a B. If they currently have a B-class property, they're going to go down a notch. They're going to look at going to C. And so when you're at that range, when you're already affordable starting today, if we do hit a recession, you're going to have more demand for your affordable housing. So that's one strategy. If you think that inflation is going to stay up for higher and longer, then you're saying that, okay, so we want to be in areas where there's going to be increased demand and the cost of replacements is going to be higher. So we're looking at, land values is almost made up. It's meaningless, but the cost of replacement, that's both your labor and material costs, are going to be something that if inflation goes up, it's going to be harder to duplicate an asset like that. So this is a non-duplicatable asset, right? The house is one of one. There's no other house like that in that location. And the cost of building such a house with material costs going up and labor costs going up is going to be harder to replace. It's going to be more expensive to replace. That means you're going to be buying an asset that's going to keep going up over time because the cost to replace it is going up over time. So that's how you're actually using inflation to your benefit when you're buying real estate. Additionally, if you are a high income earner, then we're looking at, hey, how do we maximize the depreciation of these properties? And which there's a number of strategies to do so. One, the most common is to do standard depreciation, where you depreciate the improved value of the home over 27 and a half years. But also, you can actually do what's called an accelerated depreciation, where you can actually depreciate the first 7 years of that depreciation in year one. And then you can also do what's called a cost segregation report, where you're breaking down the components of the home by 27 and a half years, 10 years, and 5 years, in which the components of the homes that are being depreciated over 5 years are going to give you a much greater return over that first couple of year period of time. So we're looking at maximizing the benefits to you. And it's not as easy as saying, your rate of return versus another rate of return, because those other strategies don't have the tax benefits. They don't have an inflation hedge. They don't have another source of income. And, as long as we're, having the right approach, given your concerns, you're able to take advantage of it. So, real estate, it's not a one size fit all. There's different strategies and approaches to that, which is why I typically recommend to, work with someone who can understand your unique concerns and challenges and your goals and help you navigate them in a way that helps you, be confident in your situation. Because, we're not ever going to say that, real estate is a perfect solution. But if you are prepared and know how to navigate those challenges, you're going to do so much better on the back end. And, you're going to be able to overcome a lot of challenges that come along the way. And it's going to work so much better for you. So Todd, as we look to wrap up today's call, what do you think are going to be some of the key drivers that are going to make an investor successful in the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, every investor always says the best time to buy was yesterday. The best time to plant a tree was last year. So getting involved, getting started is the number one thing that's going to make you successful or not. That moving forward is making the right decision in the right area. We talked a lot today about different areas of the country and why some are better than others, tax-wise, business-wise. Choosing properties in the right area, I think, is paramountly important to growing the business correctly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Todd, I do want to thank you for your time. Be very gracious. I love learning about your experience, your knowledge now operating out of multiple different states, and your insights being an investor yourself. If you have any more questions, please go to buildtorrent.com. There you can reach out to Todd directly and schedule a consultation. Without further ado, Todd, thanks again for your time and take care.
Thank you very much.